Hi, this is the Tropical Tidbit for Wednesday evening, June 3rd. As always, the thoughts in this video are mine alone, and in making decisions, please consult the National Hurricane Center and your local weather office for the best information. We continue to track Tropical Storm Cristobal, which has now made landfall in the far southeastern Bay of Campeche, just sitting here near Terms Lagoon as of this hour. Made landfall earlier this morning with maximum sustained winds of about 60 miles per hour and a pressure of 933 millibars. This is the current radar out of Mexico showing the rotation here somewhere near the southwestern edge of this lagoon. It has not made very much progress inland since coming in out of the northwest. It is forecast to make more progress inland and then do a loop back toward the north like this, very close to the coast of the Bay of Campeche again on Friday, where it is expected to re-emerge over water. And the details of exactly when this occurs and how much time this spends over land is going to be crucial for the intensity forecast going forward, because the longer this storm stays over land, the more erosion of the inner core structure will occur. If it spends a shorter amount of time over land, we might still have something spinning tightly that can come over water and re-intensify quickly. If it spends too long over land, then it will broaden out into a larger monsoon gyre and take more time to tighten back up into a stronger storm in terms of wind. So that's going to be the big thing to watch over the next 24 to 48 hours. The surface plot right now shows that the pressure nearby at a station near the lagoon is still 996, 997 millibars, so we haven't seen significant weakening yet. Now, the closer that this can stay to the coast, the less it will weaken. The terrain here is fairly flat. The mountains don't begin until you get closer to the Guatemalan border, so we're going to be watching carefully to see if this dives all the way down toward those mountains, in which case the circulation will almost certainly be destroyed, or if it stays a little closer to the coast and can retain some of that structure over the next day or so. So far on the water vapor imagery, we can see that we still have this big arching ridge over Mexico, and this steering flow has continued to push the storm down toward the south, and it's now going to experience a period of very weak steering currents as the influence of this southward flow begins to wane a little bit, and we start to watch this upper trough over Louisiana dig a little bit more into the Gulf of Mexico and arch the flow back toward the north like this, which will start to try to yank this northward over time. And as we get into Friday, we'll start to see this entire gyre start moving poleward toward the Gulf Coast, and within this, either the remnants of Cristobal or some semblance of the circulation that's there now is going to redevelop into a probably large cyclone in the central Gulf that is expected to head in the general direction of Louisiana this weekend. This is the European model's depiction of what's happening. The model had been too far west until very recently, but now seems to have caught up to what Cristobal is actually doing. This is the 48-hour forecast valid Friday morning, showing where the storm is on the model, just a little bit inland, and then you can see that it comes due north from there and actually re-strengthens rather well over the water Saturday morning, forming a fairly tight circulation that does intensify a little bit, but does kind of broaden out and is only of moderate to strong tropical storm intensity on the model on Sunday, and then Monday morning is at the coast. Now, the difference that we see from the GFS is that at the same time Friday morning, we do not have a well-defined core of Cristobal still over land. Instead, the GFS has already kind of killed the circulation and broadened it out into this larger monsoon gyre. Which one of these models is right at this point? It's about the same amount of time over land for both models. The one thing I would say here is the European does tend to have a little bit of a bias keeping tropical cyclones too strong over land. We'll see if that comes into play here. I'm not sure I've seen an example of it over Mexican terrain specifically, but we'll see if that's happening here. But we're going to keep an eye on the storm over the next day or two to see how well defined it is at this point on Friday morning, and then we'll know a lot more about its journey across the Gulf after that. Either way, the GFS depicts kind of the weaker solution here with the broad monsoon gyre. Now, I will use the GFS as an example for the rest of this because the larger scale things happening around Cristobal will remain the same regardless of which model is right about how strong Cristobal re-emerges over water. If we look at the precipitable water showing the general moisture in the atmosphere, you'll note that as the gyre begins to start pulling north again, we have a very strong fetch in dark blue here of moisture surging out of the southeast toward the Gulf of Mexico. And this moisture is getting lifted a little bit because there is a little bit of a warm front extending out over the Gulf of Mexico as this moisture surge comes northward. So there is a lot of lifting going on. In addition, we have an upper level trough that is digging into the Gulf that we talked about during this time. This is also supplying baroclinic forcing that is going to cause a large area of precipitation and thunderstorms to break out over the northwestern Caribbean and southern Gulf of Mexico during the course of Thursday night and Friday. And this is going to support a lot of convective outflow expanding outward from this region, and this is going to push back on this upper level trough over the Gulf of Mexico. And for that reason, this trough is expected to weaken, and we are likely to see this storm come up and not really have too much shear to deal with because this trough will weaken, and we can kind of see this on the GFS as the storm eventually comes up. This trough really is quite weak, and it's not really a shear concern, and shear is likely to be fairly light or moderate at most. What will be an impediment to the storm is the dry air that will inevitably be in place. We're back here to Friday morning. The backside of these troughs always have dry air in place, and if we look at the mid-level moisture field at this time, we do see that here in the brown colors, and this dry air will inevitably get entrained into a large circulation that comes north, and we can see that happen here where these lighter gray tones do get wrapped in to the circulation. And here again, Cristobal's organization coming off of the Yucatan Peninsula will be key, because if it's tighter like the European and a little stronger, it will be able to resist dry entrainment a little bit better than something big and sloppy like the GFS has. So again, a couple of wrinkles yet to figure out in the intensity forecast. But right now, I would lean more toward the weaker side just because we now do have a consensus for Cristobal maintaining at least a day and a half to 2 days fully over land, and that is going to do no good to the cyclone structure by the time it gets back out over the Gulf. But nothing is certain, and we'll keep an eye on that. If we look at the European models steering flow for Sunday morning, this is where the storm is, and I just want to show you that as we come on to the approach here toward what is expected to be Louisiana, we may see a brief slowdown and maybe bend to the left in the track before coming ashore, as we do have this large ridge over Missouri, and this is going to kind of slow down the northward progress of the cyclone just a little bit. It's not going to stall or anything. This isn't going to prevent landfall or turn it hard left into Texas, because this ridge is progressing from west to east during the course of this forecast. So if you go forward 24 hours, you can see the ridge has shifted east, and the storm simply bends around the western flank of that ridge, and that manifests as maybe a bend like this toward the northwest in the forecast. So we'll have to keep an eye on the timing of that in terms of exactly which location along the coast gets the landfall. But in all likelihood, this will be a large system envelope with a wide area of potentially flooding rainfall, and so a large swath of the northern Gulf Coast may receive significant impacts regardless of exactly where the center comes ashore. This is the official forecast showing the same general ideas we just talked about. Spend some time over land. By the time we get to Friday morning, maybe it's popping out over water, and then it accelerates northward across the Gulf, and then maybe a slight slowdown and a bend left just before landfall, now expected in Louisiana. Sometime maybe late Sunday or early Monday on the current forecast, but depending on exactly how fast it is to come north, that timing may change a little bit. So remember, there's some wiggle room here. You could see impacts on the North Gulf Coast as early as Saturday. So get preparations going just in case something comes your way, and have a plan ready to go in case this is coming to your area come the weekend. And again, exactly where it goes, a little bit of wiggle room here because this is a 4 or 5 day forecast. It could still be anywhere from the upper Texas coast to potentially Alabama. How strong could this get? Right now, the official forecast has this maxing out at about 65 mile per hour winds near the time of landfall. That's a strong tropical storm strength in terms of wind. Could this attain hurricane intensity? I don't think that's out of the question, and it's possible that we could see a Cat 1. Anything much stronger than that, I would say, would be kind of surprising given what we know right now. But of course, things always change in the tropics, and we'll have to keep an eye out. But right now, the expectation is something like a strong tropical storm where coastal surge and flooding rainfall inland are likely to be the main impacts regardless of what Cristobal looks like. So be prepared for that going into the weekend. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.